Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon. We're glad to see all of you here today for today's program. This program is presented in partnership with the Santa Cruz Public Libraries on the library's Zoom meetings platform. We thank our wonderful library partners, Sarah Jones, Victor Willis, and Jessica Goodman for their assistance in supporting our programs. The Society's DNA Special Interest Group held its monthly session earlier today, and we'll hold our next meeting on Tuesday, June 7th at 10 a.m. The DNA Special Interest Group sessions are held in person in the upstairs meeting room of Central Branch Library, where we have plenty of room to stay properly distanced. Look for reminder notices about the time and place and subject matter of the next DNA session. You can access the handouts from the DNA Special Interest Group by visiting the Genealogy Society webpage under the category of lecture recordings and handouts. I also have a couple of announcements. There's going to be a history fair at the Museum of Art and History, MA, on Saturday, May 14, from 12 to 4. And then later in the month, on Saturday, May 21st, the Genealogy Society will be hosting its volunteers at the Hagopian Home for an ice cream social. This is on May 21 at 2 p.m. So if you've been volunteering in any capacity for the Genealogy Society, you may look forward to receiving further details about the ice cream social. In a moment, I'll introduce today's speaker. First, though, I want to let you know about our next program. In June, we will be joined by Janet Keating McNaughton, who will explain how to create a location research guide for thorough genealogical research. Ms. McNaughton will use the state of Pennsylvania as her example. Today, though, we are delighted to welcome Mr. Joao Ventura, who will address us on the subject of Azorean genealogical research. Joao Manuel Diniz da Silva Ventura has been immersed in Azorean genealogy for more than 25 years. He is a professional genealogist and has worked for the government of the Azores in the field of genealogy and is currently the archivist of the Secretary of Public Works on Terceira Island. Joao was responsible for scanning church records for Terceira, São Jorge and Graciosa, and supervised the digitizing of records for, I can't remember how this is pronounced, Faial, Pico, Corvo and Flores. Please excuse me, Mr. Ventura, if I'm massacring.
It's correct.
He studied at the University of Coimbra, where he earned a degree in English and German and a postgraduate degree in archivology. He has successfully completed genealogical research for government entities, fellow genealogists, and individuals. Joao has also given genealogy workshops and lectures in São Miguel, Terceira, Faial, as well as in California and Salt Lake City. We are extremely honored to have Joao Ventura with us today. Please join me in giving Mr. Ventura a warm Zoom welcome.
Hello. Thank you for attending this lecture. First of all, I want to apologize because I'm not a native speaker of English, but I'll do my best. Okay, first of all, starting with the genealogy research in the Azores. I know that many of you have different knowledge of genealogy research, but I have to start from scratch. Before doing a research in the Azores, you have to know that there are 9 islands. And the Azores are located between Europe and the United States, 4 hours from Boston by plane, 4 or 5, depends on the wind. And then when reaching to the Azores, you have to know where to find the information. But first, before starting the research in the Azores, you have to be aware of something. Sometimes your ancestors moved to the United States or Canada or any other country, possibly in the 1800s or 1900s. The far back they left the islands, the worse it is to find the family. Because when they left, most of them couldn't read or write. They didn't have much information about their families, except for the names the age were figured out and not exact because they didn't know when they were born. They had an idea of the month, they have a day, someone told them the day, and the year is approximate. For example, a family of 10 children, they know who is the oldest and who is the youngest. So they know that they are 1 year older or younger than the other one. So when starting doing the research, you have to be aware that you will find some problems with names and dates. And with names, there's another problem, which is they would change their names when moving to the United States. The reason why, they wanted to mingle. So Cunha in Portuguese became Wedge in the United States. Roger became Rodrigues became Rogers. Silveira, Silvers. Roderick is Rodrigues in Portuguese. So this is a huge problem, which is you have an American name and you have to find the equivalent in Portuguese. Sometimes they would translate the names. Sometimes they would just adapt it phonetically. The name sounded like this, then they use that name as the family name. So this is an obstacle that many people have to solve before doing a research. There's another problem that people have when doing research abroad about Portuguese people, which is we had a significant number of single women. But most of the times, the fathers of the children, they were known. People at the village, they knew who was the father of those children. But it was not recorded. So it's common for people to live in the United States and they say the father is this man, the woman is that woman, the mother is that woman. Okay. But sometimes when they go to the documents, that's not the case. That person was born around that time in a specific village to a single mother. For many people, this is a surprise. Many of them unpleasant surprise, but we have to be aware that may happen. Of course, we have other people that left the Azores not long ago, and those individuals, they know all about their families before leaving. Some of them even were born in the Azores, so for them it's a lot easier to find the information. So as you can see, those of you that are attending may be in different positions, those that know everything about the family before leaving and those that know just a little bit. Okay. One thing that gives many people heartaches is the headaches is naming family names in Portugal. Family names in Portugal, they are hard to understand because we have for example, in the United States, we have Smith. It's a family name. In Portuguese, the equivalent, just in terms of being common, is Silva. But before the 1930s, Silva by itself was not a family name for many families because we had what I used to call compound family names. Silva could be attached to Gonçalves. So the family name would be Gonçalves Silva, not Silva by itself, but attached to Gonçalves. Some families, for example, the Gonçalves Silva, the compound name lasted from the 1930s back to the 1600s. All men were Gonçalves Silva. Manuel Gonçalves Silva, Antônio Gonçalves Silva, José Gonçalves Silva, and so on. women usually didn't have family names before 1911. They had just the invocational name, like Maria de Jesus, Catarina de Jesus, Esperança Antônia, Francisca Josefa. So no family names, only given names. Another thing that you have to be aware of, besides the naming, is where people were recorded. We have a change in Azorean society, in Portuguese society, which is when the king was expelled from the country in 1910, October the 5th, Portugal became a republic, no longer a monarchy. And with it, there was a separation between the state and the church. So on April the 1st, 1911, which is 5 months after the Republican regime was installed, we have the civil registry for all the individuals. So everyone that died, was born, or married after April the 1st, 1911, they are recorded at the civil registry. You may ask, what about the church records? The church records continue to exist even today. Those that are Catholic and they attend church, they have the religious wedding, they have the baptism, and they have the religious death ceremonies. So, for example, in my case, I have my birth certificate at the civil registry, and I have my baptism certificate at church. Before the March 31st, 1911, we have the church records. The church records, they are a big division between the civil registry in terms of where they exist. The civil registry is at the level of the council. We have a main town, which is responsible for many villages, and everyone is recorded in that main town. For example, I belong to the town of Angra, city of Angra. All the villages from half of the islands, everyone is recorded at the civil registry in Angra. The other half at the civil registry in Praia, on Terceira Island. Before that, we have church record at the local parish. So it's important when finding your ancestors and you don't have a lot of information, it's important to try to know in which village they were born, because that will give you a geographic location of where to find the birth record you need. Also, when searching parish records, be aware that people are only recorded by their first name. I'm João. There's Maria, Manuel, Antonio, son of, the name of the father, the name of the mother. In the civil registry, no, we have the full name. So at church, I'm recorded by João, even today. At the civil registry, I have my full name, João Manuel Diniz da Silva Ventura. So this is a huge difference. It makes it harder to find, for example, death records, because we have no idea where people died or when they died. So we have to find in the civil registry is very hard, especially in some of them, because they have thousands and thousands of people dying each year, and you have to go through the book. And worst, most of those books are still at the civil registry, and you're not allowed to touch those. So if you know the specific date, they will search. If not, they will say, we don't have enough information to perform a research. So it's a shame, but it's what we have. So you may ask, when were the church records? When did they begin? They began with the Council of Trent in the 1500s. Before getting there, most of you possibly know that the Azores were discovered by the Portuguese in the 1400s. They found the islands, they went to Portugal, they communicated to the king sent people here for the settlement of the islands. As you may imagine, the settlement wasn't an easy task. You have 9 deserted islands, no fruit, no animals, so they had to bring in everything they needed. The only thing available that it was needed was fresh water and possibly fish in the ocean. So they had to clear the land, they had to establish the villages. So it wasn't an easy task. Some people sometimes ask me, why don't you have more information about the settlement? Because people were not concerned with recording all the events. They were concerned with preserving their lives and thrive to the next generations. Only in the early 1500s, there's a attempt to organize society, and people try to establish the social ranks of society, who is more important than whom. So many people try to obtain coat of arms from the mainland to prosperate into the higher ranks of society. So they try to prove that they belong to important families in the mainland, and they came to the Azores searching for a better life. And and as a member of those families, they were entitled to have more land and higher importance in society. Also, those noble families, we have to be aware of one thing. As French used to say, the la crème de la crème, the most important families or richer people in the mainland, they didn't come to the Azores. The second sons did, the third sons, or the poor nobles. They were searching for an opportunity, like our ancestors left the islands to go to different countries. The same thing happened in the 1400s. Many families tried or saw the islands as an opportunity to live a better life. Though in the beginning it was really hard to survive, but probably it was a lot worse in the place where they lived. So they were not concerned with preserving documents, records, church records. Those didn't exist at the time, and they were not concerned with that. The earliest church records that we have is from 1541 in Matriz in Ribeira Grande, São Miguel Island, and in Santa Bárbara, Terceira Island. Those are the earliest church records we have. Church records, they vary throughout times. In the beginning, everyone knew each other, so they didn't give a lot of information. Maria, daughter of so-and-so, was baptized on this day and the name of the godparent, and it was enough. She was recorded. Later, they needed to add more information. It's a shame that in the beginning they didn't give more information, because I'm positive that many foreigners lived on this island or any other island, and they were not recorded uh, because they used Portuguese names. Just like many of your ancestors, when they arrived in the United States, they changed the Portuguese name to American name. Many foreigners, when they arrived on the Azores, they changed their original names into Portuguese names. For example, I found the João Fernandes. He married on Terceira Island in 1717, if I'm not wrong, and he's from Ireland, from Kent, if I'm not wrong. I think it's someplace in Ireland. So he was born there, and his father is João Fernandes. His mother is Anne Clark. Possibly someone from Terceira went to Ireland fishing or any other activity, married there, had a child, and the child returned to the Azores. It's possible. But in the 1600s, they don't give information where someone was born. So we know that that person lived there. The only exception that I find is in the 1580s, 1590s at the sea in the Cathedral of Angra. They give information on Spanish soldiers. Actually, they are very informative. They say he was baptized on the parish of the patron saint and then the name of the village. They are very informative, but it's an exception. It's not the rule. So usually they say parishioner of this village. And talking about village, also we have to be aware that there is a patron saint for the village, and there's the name of the village. For example, if you have an assessor and it says it's from the parish of Saint Peter in São Miguel Island, you have, I don't know how many, but five or six villages whose patron saint is Saint Peter. So you have to go through all of them, searching for your ancestor. Could be from one village or the other. So you have to go back and forth trying to find the information. So going back to church records, there's from the beginning to the end of the 1600s, they are not very informative. In the beginning of the 1700s, late 1600s, they give more information. The priest has to mention the names of the parents of the bride and the groom, where they were baptized and where they live, because something is being native of, another thing is being baptized in. In the 1800s, it's very common. It's not common, I would say that, but it's you can find it. Someone was born in one village and was recorded in another village, even country. I've seen couples, for example, from Brazil or the United States. The child was born there. They brought the child here, and the child was baptized here. So possibly there's a church civil record in the United States or Brazil, and then they have the church, the baptism record here in the Azores. Today, although not very common, still happens. But today it's like a trend. Okay, let's bring the child back home so the family can meet the child, and we have a family celebration of the baptism. It's different. In those days, they would returning to the islands for leisure, but because probably they were returning, their dream was not fulfilled, and they decided it was time to return home and continue their life, the life that they had. Then we have the marriages, so they give more information, and death records. Death records, particularly death records, they are more informative in the 1800s, in the end of the 1800s. Before that, before 1860, they are not very informative. Someone died, married, widower, so they don't give that many details. one thing that puzzles many people is the age at death, how old they were when they died. They, as I said before, they had no idea how old they were. The difference could be 10 years. They could be 10 years older than they say that they were, or 10 years younger. Especially if you find someone that say in the document it says that it was 100 years old. I would say 80 something, 90. Of course, some of them may be 100, but the majority they didn't reach that high number in the 1800s and before. Now, the life expectancy was not really high, although I've seen many couples having living and celebrating that 60th anniversary. 60 years together, more than 60 years together. So, but it's not very common that to happen. So people didn't live long. Life was not easy. They had to struggle and survive, and food was not easy to find. Possibly many of them lived longer because they didn't eat as we eat today, but it's another thing. Okay, I'd like to show you the place where you can find church records. Let me see if I can share the, okay. Okay, this is Portal Cultura Azores. This is the center of knowledge in the Azores. You can search in Google and you reach this page. Here, although it's in Portuguese, it's easy to find. I'll explain to you. This is Parish Records, Registros Paroquiais, Pesquisa de Registros Paroquiais. This is Passport Research, Pesquisa de Passaportes. Let's start with Registros Paroquiais. So we have Ilha, Island. You have the 9 islands here. Santa Maria, São Miguel, Terceira, São Jorge, Pico, Faial, Graciosa, Flores e Corvo. And then, for example, if you choose São Miguel, then you have to choose Conselho, which is the council. After 1911, the records are organized by Conselho. So, for example, if you go to Nordeste, and now you have to search which village in Nordeste you want to research. Either all of them, or Achado, Achadinho, Algarvia, Lomba da Fazenda, Norte Estinho, Pedreira, Salga, Santana, São Jorge. Okay, let's go to São Jorge. And you want to find baptisms. You go to baptisms, baptismos, and search. And you have 4 pages of church records. They have from the most recent, in this case, the book from 1901 to 1905. And then if you go to the 4th page, we have the earliest records for São Jorge in Nordeste. It's from 1563 to 1629. Let's take a look at the earliest records. Okay. This is the condition that you will find many of these documents. So they are almost 500 years old, and they have survived. They have seen many things happen in the Azores throughout these times. So, and they exist, and hopefully they will continue to exist. I want to go back. Oops. Let me see. Okay. No, let me see. No, this is not. Okay. Compartilhamento de tela. want to go back, but I'm not able to go back. Okay, no problem with that. Okay.
Oh, yeah, it looked like it opened in a separate tab.
Yes, it does. It's not easy. Okay, this is where you can find church records. I'm not going through that again because I don't want to get lost. And then you have passports. We have 3 issuers of passports in the Azores, with the civil government created in 1832. We have 3 regions that are ruling the Azores: the civil registry, the civil government of Horta for the islands of Faial, Pico, Flores, and Corvo. Then we have the civil government of Angra for Terceira, Graciosa, and São Jorge. And we have the civil government of Ponta Delgada for the islands of São Miguel and Santa Maria. Okay, here you go to passports. Then here you have to pick which one you want to choose, want to research. So we have Angra, and you hit procurar, search. So this is not from the civil government. From the 1770 through 1818, this is a different kind of passport. So I'm not focusing on this. Only after 1832 through 1929. Someone was asking about pictures on the passports. We have, on Terceira, we have pictures since 1917. In São Miguel is 1920. In Faial, if I'm not wrong, is 1929 or 26. They have pictures on the passports. These books, I think this, here I go again. They have pictures for this time period. Okay. So 1928, they have the picture of the individual that is leaving the country. You have the basic information. In this case, passport to José Joaquim de Melo, 77. So we have the basic information for him. He's from village of Ribeirinha, the name of the father and the mother, and he's living to, let me see if I'm able to put to the side. No. He's going to California at the age of 77. So you may find, if not your direct ancestor, but brothers or sisters of direct ancestors. Or if you're just doing some research about clothing, jewelry, even glasses. This gentleman is wearing glasses. You can use these pictures to find information about what people wore in those days and how old they were when they left. We have people from all ages. In this case, she's 26. She looks like 40 something. Okay, then going back, let me see if I can go back. I'll manage. Okay, here I go again. Okay, we have other sources of research. So we have, let me see if this is not in English. We have genealogy manuscripts. The genealogy manuscripts are the ones that allow us to make the connection between church records and the settlers. Because at some point, the earliest historic it's work that we have is Saudades da Terra by Gaspar Frutuoso. He was a priest in São Miguel Island, and he published 6 volumes. He didn't publish, he wrote 6 volumes. They were published in the 1800s. And it's the first attempt to write a history of the Azores from the settlement until that time, in the 1500s. And he makes the connection between the settlers and many noble families of San Miguel. Of course, these will change throughout the times, because at some point, some family is not important, but later that family becomes important because they made money, they had land. So historians looked at them differently. The same thing as today. Many people, if they didn't have the money, no one would care for them. No one would look at them or know, they didn't know their names. But when they have the money, they are able to conquer a place in society. So the same thing with the genealogy manuscripts and the historic works. So in the 1600s, you have some of those books published. And the Phoenix and Grace is one of the most important for Terceira. I did the index of all the volume, the genealogy volume, and I can tell you that I learned a lot from doing it, because when listing a family, it was written by a priest in 17. He started in the 1690s and he died in 1711. So the book was written between those years, and it would list the children of a certain family. And at some point, he wrote this more than once. There are more children born to this couple. I'm not mentioning them, so these won't be embarrassed, because only poverty derives from them. So a family tree, whether we like it or not, there's a tendency to trim the tree. The branches that are not good for the tree, they are trimmed. How many of our ancestors, when they moved from the mainland to the Azores, were not trimmed from the trees in the mainland? That's why we are not able to make the connection between the Azores and the mainland. We know that they descend from those families, but there's no names or physical person that we can connect, say, this was the son of that. No. Possibly they made some mistakes, they committed some crimes, they abused girls, and they ran away so they wouldn't assume their mistakes or go to jail. And here it was a way of living as unknowns. No one would know them. They just vanished from the mainland. And here, just like in the 1800s, or even early 1900s, when you search for passports, you see that thousands of individuals from the Azores immigrate to the United States. There was no quota of immigration to the United States. Everyone was allowed to enter the country because the United States needed people. So they would welcome everyone that wanted to live there. Today is the opposite. When you go through customs, you have a huge questionnaire you have to answer: why you're visiting the country, how long you're staying, and it takes half an hour sometimes, because many people, they go there, they don't return, they just stay there. Okay, in those days they would go there and stay there. Most of them, they wouldn't return, and most of them would forget the language by choice, forget the origins by choice. And that's why it's very difficult for many people to make the connection between the United States and the Azores. One thing that it's important to keep in mind is that not all the individuals require the passport. And those that have a passport, doesn't mean that the passport belonged to them. In one of my workshops in the United States, in the audience, there was a cousin. His grandmother was the brother of my grandfather. I knew him, but he told me a story I had no idea, which is our aunt Maria wanted to leave to the United States in 1920. And days before departure, she had cold feet and she didn't want to go. So her sister Francisca, this cousin's grandmother, said, "You're not leaving, I'm leaving." And she had the passport of the sister and she left the United States at the age of 20. Very few relatives in California, and she went there. So if you're searching for a passport issued to Francisca, you won't find it because she left as Maria. And how many of our ancestors we are searching for one family, one name, and we are not able to find it because they went under a different name. And many of them, they just jumped to the ship. That's it. Especially from Flores and Corvo, the number of official passports issued for individuals of Flores and Corvo is very low, which means that they went illegally. The ship on the way from Terceira, Faial, or São Miguel to the United States, they would be off Flores and they would go in rowing boats to the ship and jump aboard and leave to the United States. So most of the time it's very hard to find those individuals, really hard. So I'd like to hear questions you may have so I can go straight to the point and not, are there any?
Mr. Ventura, you
questions?
have 15 questions so far in the
Okay.
queue. And
Can you
generally what
please-
will happen is people will start typing in more once you start asking.
Uh-huh.
Okay, let's see. Let's look at the first question. It says, when were passports first required for those leaving the Azores to come to the US? I know a family that has no photos of an ancestor who came to the US in 1920, but I told them they could probably contact you to research for a passport application.
Yes, in 1920, if it was from Angra, they have a picture for sure. Unless it was a child under the age of 10, it was not required to have a picture on the passport. But the family, they would have a picture of in the file, because we have the passports, the books that I showed you, and sometimes we have all the paperwork that was needed to issue the passport, birth records for men, documents from the army saying that they were free to go to obtain a passport, or authorizations from parents, physical description like height, eyes, hair, all these features are mentioned there. So in Terceira, we have both the books and the paperwork. In São Miguel, I think that they have the paperwork from 1920 on. In Faial, I think most of it is gone, but I still have to obtain that information from them.
Great, thank you. Your next question, I'm sure I will not pronounce it correctly. I'm very
No
sorry.
problem.
How about I spell it? It's BOMDIA, maybe good day or hello. It's so nice to see you again. It's a beautiful day in the Sonoran Desert of Arizona. So someone is saying hello to you. Next one, I don't know when they were acquired, but what exists is Horta, 1836 to 1939, Ponta Delgada, 1879 to 1939, gaps, and Ingran, 1770 to 1937. The port from Flores is lost. I don't know if I understand the question, but perhaps you do.
Yes. The passports were required after 1832. We had a civil war between the liberals and the conservatives. The liberals won, and there was a different organization of society. So they required passports for people to leave the country. In the first place, they required a passport from going from one island to the other. But it was just in the 7 years. But after that, it's just to leave the country. In Faial, there's one book missing. In Terceira, we have the whole collection. In São Miguel, they started in 1870s. The previous ones, they were lost at this moment. It doesn't mean that who knows if they will find them in a cellar or attic in some public building. But at the moment, they don't exist. They are lost. So they existed at some point, but they are lost. So that's why many people have copies of passports. And when they try to look at the original record, they don't find it because the book is lost. Next.
All right. This came in when you were talking about Silva and how Silva was not a standalone name. It said, can the speaker spell these names, as the translation is really changing them and it's hard to figure out?
I used to write standard Portuguese. The names is standard Portuguese. Let me explain. When doing my genealogy for hire, I provide a copy, a transcription of the document, the way it was written by the priest in that specific book. And then when I translate it to English, I write the standard Portuguese of today. For me, it's very important to do this, because if I want to share the information, and if everyone writes standard Portuguese, it's easier to find a connection. For example, Manuel, before 1911 or 1910, it was spelled with an O, M-A-N-O-E-L. Today is a U instead of an O. Manuel, not Ma-no-el. So, as opposite to English almost never changes. The same language that was written in the 15, 16, 1700s with slight changes is the same one that you write today. In Portuguese now, whenever we have a change in our social or our political system, we tend to update the writing of the language. For example, when we became a Republican regime, we dropped all the TH, no more Katharina, it's Catarina, T-A, C-A-T-A. Thomas, with the TH, the H was dropped. No more double consonants, except for one word. So if you try to use the original name from the records, you will have a hard time. For example, the name Bittencourt from Graciosa, mostly from Graciosa and some São Jorge, unless from other islands, you will find hundreds, I wouldn't say hundreds, but tens of ways of writing the name. B-E-B-I, and then double T or just one T ending in the T, ending with the R. So if you use different spellings, you'll have a hard time. If you're using a software, of course. If you are using paper, no problem. But if you have a database, software, or if you post your upload your family tree online, it will be hard to find matches because you're not speaking the same language.
Well, and on that note, the next comment says the naming issue that you're referring to is so true. I have that issue myself. There's no way to know because the English anglicized version doesn't line up with anything Portuguese. I think they used the way of passage since it's waters, but I may never know.
Yeah. For example, someone was asking about difference siblings with different family names. It happens a lot. It happens a lot. Depends, I think, on that specific day that the father goes to the civil registry and records the child. They just give one name for one child, another name for the other child, and that's it. Sometimes men take the father's family names, and the daughters take the mother's family names. For example, my grandmother was Maria Esperança Diniz. Diniz comes from her mother. Her sister, which was a lot older than my grandmother, was Faustina Canda Diniz. Diniz also from the mother. The two boys, António Machado Vitória and Francisco Machado Vitória. Machado Vitória because their father was António Machado Vitória. So the boys took the father's family name and the girls took the mother's family name. And you may say, okay, two of them were born before 1911. Right. Antonio was born in 1907. Faustina was born in 1908. But my grandmother was born in 1920 at the civil registry. Well, she was recorded at the civil registry. And Francisco was born in 1923. So again, at the civil registry. But they continue to use the rule of boys take the father's family names and the girls take the mother's family name. And on my maternal grandfather, the same thing happened. The girls are all Neves, in English would say Neves, Neves, and the boys are all Silva. So this applies to many families. And
sure.
This, yeah.
The rest of that question, it says, is there any significance when de is inserted into the family name, such as de Sousa Salema?
No, it doesn't. It's just it's like it's a particle. In English, I would translate it as of. John of Kent. John that came from Kent. So this was used in the beginning as to tell the origin where the person came from. Today, it's part of the name. For example, my name is De Silva. I don't have to use the, but my parents put De Silva in my name. It has no meaning. It doesn't mean nobility, nothing. So it exists. I think it's a way of also it's easier to pronounce the name. You don't have to break. You just use that particle as a way of pronouncing the other name easier. But if you look for all the families of a certain couple, for example, the Sousa Salema, which is the case that was asked, you will find that for some children, the father is de Sousa Salema. For other children, it's just Sousa Salema. So there is no rule. I would say that the family name is a compound family name, Sousa Salema. I just add some more thing about this name. Salema is the name of a fish. So the original family name is only Sousa. They use Salema, and possibly it's from São Miguel. They use Salema as to tell one family from the other, because there were other Sousas in the village, and they want to tell apart one family from the other. Oh, those are the Salemas, which is a nickname that became a family name. And we have a lot of name of fishes that were used as family names.
All right. Well, your next question says, can you talk a little bit about the abandoned babies? I realize that some people were very poor. Did the families that took them in receive compensation? I saw on record from 1895 a reference that Exposta was listed in a book in Santa Cruz Graciosa. Were expostos recorded, and do those books exist?
After 1860, most of them are recorded at only one church in the Conselho. In this case, Santa Cruz in Graciosa Island is the head church of the Graciosa Island. So all the abandoned children from all the four villages, they are taken to Santa Cruz, and they are baptized there, and they are recorded. In some cases, they have specific signs. For example, they have a blouse or fabric or a note, written note, requesting the name of the child. Child should be this, and so they have special requests for the abandoned children. Many of these abandoned children belong to well-to-do families. The girls got pregnant. They didn't have the mean. They socially wasn't acceptable for them to have the baby, to keep the baby. Sometimes later they marry the child's father, and they claim the baby. Sometimes it's not baby; it's just a grown person. And the nursing mothers, or in the United States, I would compare to foster families. They receive a compensation from the Câmara Municipal, which is municipality. They receive a compensation from them to raise those babies. But we have to be realistic. In times when they didn't have a lot to eat, or if they had, for example, 6 children of their own and 2 expostos, I would say that first they would feed their babies and later they would feed the expostos. That's why many of them died in infancy, in the first years of life. But many of them, they stayed with the family for up to the age of 7. At the age of 7, they could move on, work, or live with another family. And there was a record of those babies who they were given to, and every year there was some sort of update of what was happening to the child. This is recorded mostly at Misericordia, I would say mercy in English. It's like a charitable institution that would take care of the poor and the abandoned. So they run the hospitals and all that. Of course, also many of these exposed, they came from single ladies, professional ladies that work for, I would say, prostitutes. They didn't have the means to, or the way of keeping the babies. Many of them, they worked for noble families, and they were abused by the boss. It wasn't an easy life for them. Many of them, it was not. So some people tend to prejudice them, but no, they were victims. They were not. They didn't have an easy life. Even in the 1960s, if there was a single girl that would go to the hospital to have a baby, it was common for the nurses. There were nuns. They would take the baby from the mother and give them. Intercited, they would give them to the Americans. The Americans would adopt them illegally and take them to the United States. Today, many people are returning here trying to find the biological family. And sometimes it's almost impossible, unless through DNA. So in case of the family claiming the baby, sometimes they do it in another place. For example, I've seen a couple, both from Pico in their 60s or 70s. They married here on Terceira Island in the 1800s. And they claimed 3 daughters that were born to a single father in Pico. So they were here in Terceira. We have the legitimization of the children. And sometimes these babies, they are born to single mothers who live with the child's father, but he never legitimized the babies. Sometimes they have social differences and society wouldn't let them marry. They couldn't. But as I said in the beginning, many people knew who were the unknown fathers. because when people apply to become a priesthood applications, they need to show that they were 100% Catholic, old Catholics, so the Jews wouldn't be able to become priests. And when do we have unknown fathers or grandfathers, there's always someone, a witness, that says the father is this man. Everything is done in secrecy, and so only in that document that information is unveiled. I found once there were two possible fathers, and they showed that both of them were Catholic, so there was no impediment for that young man to become a priest.
Well,
So-
speaking of a Jewish question, someone says, I would love to know how to research my Jewish roots. I believe my ancestors were Jewish and from Santa Maria.
It's not easy because, first of all, we have to be aware that we use church records to research the family. So if you are using church records that are Catholic records, they wouldn't easily say that the father or the mother is Jewish. No, you can try to search at if they have the civil document, because after the 1830s up to 1911, we have church records for 99.999% of the individuals, but there's the civil registry also. Usually I don't mention this because the number of people recorded there is so low that I don't want to confuse people, but the question was brought up, so I have to talk about it. So if there's a Jew or a Protestant marrying the Azores to a local person, they would go to the civil registry and record that marriage or that birth. But as I said, could be 1 in 10 years, marriage or birth or death. So the number is very diminutive. You can try to search, but I don't know the time frame. If it's after 1832, we have freedom of religion in Portugal. So people were free to express their religion. We have a very important Jewish community in Angra, in Horta, in Ponte Delgado. They still have the synagogue in Ponte Delgado. So people could freely practice their religion. So if it's before, it's almost impossible, I would say.
All right. Well, speaking of church records, someone's asking, are the parish and church records indexed?
Some priests they did some index. Some priests they did. Most of them didn't. So and some people do indexes. But if they are in the book, you can find them. If not, probably you can find them online. But there's no specific. I don't know anything specific about that.
And then on the issue of civil records, someone's wanting to know if any of the civil records after April 1911 are going to be released in the near future.
Hopefully. We have a new director for culture in the Azores, and this is an issue I wanted to discuss with the previous one, but I didn't have the time or opportunity to do it, and it was just in power for 1 year when it wasn't enough. Before having those records online, we still have to deal with church records that are still at the civil registry, like those from Graciosa, São Jorge, from the 1880s up to 1911, because the records we have online, it's the copies, and it's not the original. Records from Ribeira Grande in São Miguel from 1906 through 1911, they are still at the civil registry. And also the same thing with Nordeste and other civil registries. So I want to discuss with this director to see if there's a way that those records go online. they are incorporated in the public libraries and archives, and if they're made available online. Because, and the government is losing a lot of money, because if we need a certificate from the civil registry, the income goes to the mainland. If we request a certificate from a public library or archives, the money stays in the Azores. And the number of people that request certificates, birth certificates or marriage certificates every year is really high, because many people, they want to apply to become a Portuguese citizen, and they need the certificates. So we as researchers, we need those documents available, and the government needs the income. So it's win-win.
All right. The next question is, in addition to having parish records available, can we research land records, land deeds, and land maps?
No, we cannot. Those documents, they are not made available for public. At some point we could. Today we cannot. The closest we have is the orphans inventory, which is whenever a child, someone died, and if they had minors, mentally handicapped children living abroad, they needed an orphans inventory. In that document, they list all the children of the couple and all the properties that they owned. But you need to know the death record for the person, and of course, you have to be certain or almost certain that that person owned something, because sometimes they own nothing. For example, in São Miguel, most people died owning nothing. They were just poor. They were born poor and they died poor. So you won't find. At the tax department, in Portuguese, finanças, we have imposto sucessório, which is whenever someone died, they have to go there and say, this is the properties of the person, this is the name of the heirs of this person. So, but only direct descendants have access to those. Me as a researcher, I go there and ask and say, no, we're not allowed to search those documents. So.
Well, now we have some questions on ships. So the first one says, was it common of men to stow away on whaling ships headed to the United States in the late 1800s, Massachusetts to California, for example? Was it to avoid conscription?
Yes, to avoid conscription and to have a free ride to the United States. They would work as crew members. When they would get to the United States, they were ready to go, and they wouldn't have to pay for the fare from here to the United States.
And then, are there any island records that show people leaving to stow away on a whaler or a ship? And
no,
did the ship kept no records of passengers?
No, they were only interested, as far as I know, they were only interested in having crew members. And then I don't know if in Boston, in New Bedford, the Whalers Museum, they may have some crew lists of individuals. You can try the Whalers Museum in New Bedford. People can Google and contact them. They are very friendly, and perhaps they will give some information on the crew members. But again, you will have the name. Possibly no age, no origin, just that someone, for example, Manuel Medeiros was a crew member. Okay, Manuel Medeiros is like John Smith. So it's a name, but doesn't add a lot to the research.
Sure, and one of the people with the Genealogical Society here says that New Bedford does have crew lists.
Okay.
And on that, a question says, if a child was indentured or hid on board a whaling vessel, would there be any record that might trace the path, for instance, between Pico Island and New Bedford?
The whalers, mostly the American whalers, they would go to Faial and Pico and Flores. So it was common for individuals from those islands leave as crew members. Now, children, probably they worked the ship if they did go. Probably they worked because I've seen passports issued to 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds going by themselves. I mean, official passports. So if there are official passports, there are also stowaways at 7, 8, or 6. Or, yeah.
And then someone's asking, how do you spell the whalers who kept crew lists?
I have no idea.
All right. What is your best advice for those of us who have the near impossible situations like whaler stowaways or name changes that don't make any sense? And do you have any, specific resources I think they're looking for?
Try to find the next kin, if there's any relatives or cousins or brother siblings. It's the best way. It's the best way to try to find information. Some of them I consider dead ends. People wanted to become anonymous, and they succeeded becoming anonymous. It's like the it's not a story, it's history. It's Joe King. When he left the United States, they asked his name, and it was Joaquim in Portuguese. The way he pronounced and the way the person heard in the United States, I think it was Ellis Island, he wrote down Joe King. So we know that the first name is Joaquim, but the rest of the name, so we have no idea. So it's Joe King. And people, they were not concerned with making the connection between the United States and the Azores. They wanted to pursue a better life and leave everything behind. And some of them, they would tell stories to family members, others didn't. So, and I think one source that has been explored yet in the United States is church records. As good Catholics, most of the immigrants, they would go to Catholic school churches to marry. And possibly those records may have information on the individuals more than the civil registry, because the civil registry says this man married that woman, no further information from Western Islands. That's it. That's it.
Well, your next question is on baptismal records. It says, can you give us tips as to how these church baptismal records are written? I can read Portuguese, but the handwriting isn't easy to read. Is there a system? The first name is listed, but sifting through to find the rest of the name isn't easy. Do you have any suggestions how to read these records more easily?
No, it's not easy. It's not easy to read them. Even for me, I'm trained reading documents. It's not easy to read the names. Sometimes we have a short of a name, and we don't know what the abbreviation stands for. So you have to compare with other writings in the same book. Usually, the same priests tend to write the same way. You have to compare and see if it's a P or it's a V. For example, some priests write the P and the V the same way. And then R-A or P-R-A, it's Pereira, pear tree in English. V-R-A, it's Vieira, scallop. But the V and the P, the way it's written, it's almost the same. It's almost the same name. So you have to compare with other names, try to find unfolded names. If it's Vieira written with all the letters, or Pereira with all the letters. So you have to go back and forth. So you have to compare and try to find other priests. For example, if you are searching for the children of a certain couple, you are not certain of the name. Try to find another priest in the same book and try to find a child born to that couple, and then you can compare the names.
Well, on the topic of P's and V's, it says, what are the family names for Prada or Pereira?
In the Azores, you won't find Prada. If you find Prada in the Azores, possibly Ponta Delgada. Pereira is very common. It's probably you'll find it in all the islands. So Prada probably is abbreviated. The abbreviation of Pereira looks like Prada, but Prada no, is not. You won't find it easily in the Azores, the name Prada.
Next question says, I'm from Terceira, and my dad was in the army there in 1949. My question is there a website or a group where I can find some information about the time and possibly photos?
Lodges field on Facebook, searching for Lodges field. There are some groups with photos and people that were living in the Azores in those days.
Next question says, where can we find the list of original families on the islands of Santa Maria and São Miguel?
There's a book, Genealogies of São Miguel and Santa Maria. The book, I think it's out of print, but you can find in public libraries. In the United States, I know that they have in Salt Lake City, probably in Modesto, and probably there's interloan library between the libraries, and you can request in one the book from the other. But genealogies from São Miguel and Santa Maria is the source to research for the original families of those islands.
Next question said, is it true that people who moved to Brazil and then returned to the Azores started using the last name of Brazil, or is Brazil a real last name in the Azores?
We have no real last names in the Azores. Someone went to Brazil and brought that it's someone is from Brazil and then became a family name. This is very common in São Jorge Island, this family name Brazil. And also in São Jorge Island, the naming from father to son is also unique because it's not common only in São Jorge Island, but other islands as well. For example, Caetano Machado, his children will become Machado Caetano, because Machado is a very common family name. And to tell one family from the other, they use the unusual first name of that person. So we know that those Machados are descendants of Caetano. And Caetano becomes a family name. So this is the natural evolution of names. They can continue for 3, 4, 5 generations. Then at some point they use the name on the mother side because it's more common, or to the village. So people try to mingle when they move from one place to the other. For example, someone from São Jorge moved to Terceira, family name is Silveira. All these children use the mother's family name because the family name from the mother is common to that village, while Silveira from the father is not common. So he wants to participate in the village. They want people to know that he belongs to the Coelho de Ornelas family and not the Silveira family. This is natural evolution. So if in terms of naming, if you are trying to find the connection between one family, everyone with that family name belongs to the same family, it's not applicable in the Azores or in Portugal. No, things change. So we have to always search from the father, for example, the baptism of the child or birth, and then next step is searching the parents' marriage. Then search for the record of the birth record of the mother and the father, and then the grandparents' marriage, and so on. This is the way you should do to avoid mistakes. Because as I was saying the other day to someone, when I was doing genealogy of an entire village on Terceira Island, in the 1820s, I found 3 couples, Manuel de Souza and Maria de Jesus. All 3 of them were having children in the same time frame. So I had to compare the godparents and the dispensations to tell one couple from the other. So we have to follow the documents. Don't skip generations. Don't skip documents. Baptism, marriage, baptism, marriage, and so on.
All right, so this is our last question, and I think it might be a short answer. It says, one of my ancestors got married when the wife was 20 and the husband was 35. Is a large age difference common in Azores weddings?
Yes, yes. I've seen they were in their teens and they were in their 60s or 70s. And the opposite, he was 17, 18, she was 50 something. So it's marriage still is a contract. Today we have the love. In those days, it was a contract between individuals that lived in the same village or neighboring village, belonged to certain social group. Those that owned something, they married each other, and those that didn't own a dime, they would marry whoever they wanted. So it's very common for the poor to marry young and the rich to marry late. And I asked some elders in my family, why was that? Because the farmers, they needed to have some basis for the family before marrying. That's why they marry in the 30s, and they are in their early 20s or middle 20s. So, and some families don't mingle each other. For those that know the Azores, you know the villages, they are very small villages. Some of them are bigger, but most of them are very, very small. And we have segregation in the village. These neighborhoods live the poor, the other neighborhoods live the rich or the well, or people with, or the farmers. They don't marry each other. The poors work for the farmers, but there's never a marriage between them. Society doesn't allow them to marry. That's why we have the single mothers. Usually they are abused and they leave, and that's it.
Well, thank you so much for all of your answers to these questions. That was wonderful. Gail, you have some closing comments, I'm sure. And for those of you on the call, you can use our reactions button and clap for Mr. Ventura. Gail, are you around?
I'm trying, there, I'm unmuted. Joao, thank you for a most comprehensive presentation about Azorean genealogical research and resources available for researching Azorean ancestors. I suspect you will probably be receiving some additional questions after this presentation. For everyone in attendance, we invite you to visit the Genealogical Society of Santa Cruz County website at https://scgensoc.org. When you visit the website, you will find the membership application form there. If you are not already a member of the Genealogical Society of Santa Cruz County, we cordially invite you to join our society. Thank you for being with us for today's program. I want to mention, if you want to save the chat, there's quite a lot of interesting information in the chat, as well as helpful links. You can click on the 3 dots at the bottom of the chat box and then click on Save Chat, and that will enable you to then download it on your computer after today's program is over. Please join us again on the first Tuesday of next month, June 7, at 1 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time for the presentation by Janet Keating-McNaughton on how to create a location resource guide for research with examples from Pennsylvania. And now Sarah's going to show how to register for next month's program. To register for next month's program, all you need to do is enter your first and last name, your email address, then click on the optional small yes box at the bottom, which allows the Genealogical Society of Santa Cruz County to send you more information about a variety of events you might be interested in attending. Once you click the blue register button, you will receive the Zoom information for the next program. Thank you again, all of you from everywhere. I was so excited to see where all you were from. Thank you for attending this program this afternoon, and we hope you'll join us again soon.
Okay, thank you for being here. It was a pleasure.
Thank you all for joining us this afternoon, this evening, depending where you're at, and we hope to see you again. Bye-bye.